Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Best wishes to all of us. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. On this very fine day and in good health, we can gather in this forum, both offline and online. And it is our privilege that we can join today's visiting lecturer in FST. Our Honorable Professor Jess Sammut, M.Sc, P.hD, from School of Biological Earth and Environmental Sciences, University, New South Wales, UNSW, Sydney, Australia. Our Honorable All Vice Dean in Faculty of Science and Technology, FSD UT, who joined online. All of the head study programs in the Faculty of Science and Technology, Universitas Terbuka, Mr. Fauji Zuhairi, as an expert staff of Vice Rector of Collaboration and Research Affairs. Our moderator, Mrs. Hikmah Zikriyani, lecturer of Biology Study Program. All lecturers, students, and all participants who present in this visiting lecture. Firstly, praise is to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for His mercy and grace. Today we are all able to attend the visiting lecturer, our extraordinary speaker, Professor Jasmine, on the highly relevant and strategic topic of exploring sustainability challenges in rice stream farming system. Welcome, Prof. Jasmine in FSTUT. Ladies and gentlemen, the integrated stream pond and rice paddy, we call paddy, farming system, better known as rice stream cultivation, has developed in various coastal regions, Asia, including Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and also Thailand. The system emerged as an adaptation to the dynamics of the coastal environment, climate change, and the economic needs of local communities. On the one hand, this model can increase farmers' incomes and reduce dependence on a single commodity. However, on the other hand, the system also addresses serious challenges that require comprehensive examination. In Indonesia, I remember that the system quite similar. We call it tumpang sari, yes. But I think the system in coastal cultivation is more complicated, I think. Agriculture and fisheries must operate in harmony with the principle of environmental sustainability, community welfare, and economic sustainability. Cross-sector collaboration between researchers, government, the private sector, NGOs, and communities is essential. Through the exchange of insight in this forum, we can strengthen synergies and unite efforts toward a more resilient, environmentally friendly, and sustainability profitable aquaculture system. We greatly appreciate the contribution of Prof. Jess, who will share this research of field experiences and best practices, the context of ecology, socioeconomics, land management, and aquaculture technology. We hope that today's visiting lecture will open up opportunities for long-term collaboration that will have a real impact on coastal communities and their resources needs. Ladies and gentlemen, this event is organized by collaboration between Biology Study Program and Agribusiness Study Program of the Faculty of Science and Technology Universitas Terbuka. Hopefully, after attending this visiting lecture, it can inspire us to continue working to develop research that can be useful for the sustainability of our environment. We express our gratitude to Prof. Jasmine for your time and sharing. I also would like to thank the agribusiness and biology study programs for continuing these good activities with UNSW University for the next. Finally, we would like to thank all parties who have help organize this event. That's all for me. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Nurma, for giving a warm speech. And distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to the main event of the day, which is the visiting lecture by the Professor Jess Sammut, B.A. Hons, M.Sc, P.hD, on the topic of exploring sustainability challenges in rice shrimp farming systems. Professor Jasmine Sammut is a professor at the School of Biological, Earth and Environmental Sciences, UNSW, Sydney, and we are honored to have him here today. Before we begin, a quick reminder to all online participants, please ensure your camera is on and your microphone is muted during the lecture. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature or submit your question in the following format: your name underscore institution or UTA daerah underscore question. And alternatively, you can raise your hand to ask your question directly to us at question and answer session. Please also remember to fill out the attendance form after the event. The link will be shared in the chat box at the end of the session. Now, let me introduce the moderator for today's session, Ms. Hikmah Zikriyani, M.Si, who will guide us through this insightful lecture. So, Ms. Hikmah, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Randy. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. With sincere respect, I would like to begin the session by welcoming everyone who is present in here and also in online. The Dean of Faculty of Science and Technology, Universitas Terbuka, Dr. Subekti Nurmawati, M.Si, the Vice Dean of FST UT, Professor Dr. Ernik Yuliana, M.Si, Dr. Randa Inggit Winarni, M.Si, and Dr. Pepi Rospina Pertiwi, SP, M.Si, the Head of Study Program at FST UT, and of course, our distinguished speaker for today's lecture, Professor Jasmine Sammut, B.A. Hans, M.Sc, Ph.D., who is already here with us today. Okay, welcome to FST UT, Professor. Okay, I hope you have a great time in here. Okay, and finally, to all participants, lecturers, students, colleagues, and also friends who are joined with us on site and also online, I am very welcome to all of you. So my name is Hikmah Zikriyani. So I am from Biology Study Program at FST UT. It's really an honor for me to act as a discussion facilitator for today's visiting lecture. So here with us, our amazing speaker, Professor Jasmine Sammut, B.A. Hans, M.Sc, Ph.D., who will share his expertise through a lecture titled Exploring Sustainability Challenges in Rice Shrimp Farming Systems. So I think he will provide us with insightful perspectives and also valuable knowledge on this important topic. So he graduated from PhD from BA Hons, Physical Geography, UNSW, converted in 1987, and then graduated from 1988. Continue his master degree at the same university and also PhD at the same university. So if we see the latest publication that he has is about unveiling the pandemic's ripples, a study of COVID-19 effect on the catfish and shrimp farmers on and export and enterprises in Vietnam's Aquaculture International. So the other publication you may see in his Google Scholar, okay, by click on his name, Jasmine Sammut. Okay. So, Professor, I think without further ado, okay, here's Professor Jasmine Sammut, B.A. Hans, M.Sc, Ph.D. So, Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Hikmah. I don't know. Hello. This on? Okay, I think you can probably hear me at the back anyway. Thank you for the warm welcome, Dr. Subekti and also Hikmah. It's great to be here. I feel very grateful to the university for inviting me to speak to you today and also to participate in the conference today. And as I mentioned to a few of your colleagues, I'm very impressed by the facilities and the resources that you have at this university. It's very impressive. So congratulations on providing a fantastic educational experience. And I hear you've got a very big enrolment as well, probably the biggest I've ever heard of. So yes, I'm very, very impressed. I have been working in aquaculture for over 30 years, and I started most of my research actually here in Indonesia on tambak udang. That was in 1996. Before that, I was doing a little bit of work in India on fish disease, and I noticed where I was working that they had a problem with tanah sulfat masam. It's in India. But the Australian government said, would you like a project helping to fix tambak? And so I said yes. And they said, how about we do it in Indonesia? And so I went to meet the people in Maros in Makassar. It used to be called the Research Institute for Coastal Aquaculture. It's gone now because BRIN was formed. And I started a very productive collaboration with the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, and also with Gajah Mada University. They were involved. And then when the tsunami affected Aceh, reconstruction, mainly rebuilding technical capacity. So I've had a long association with Indonesia. But at the moment, I'm working on lobsters, so in Lombok. But I do a lot of more work at the moment in Vietnam and in Papua New Guinea. So today I'm going to talk about the work in Vietnam. Two projects, one that came to an end during COVID, and then another one that followed on. The first one was funded by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, and the second project is funded by a secret donor, a philanthropist. Before I talk in detail, sorry, just on that first slide, the shrimp farming system I'm going to talk about is behind this woman. This woman is a lead farmer, Mrs. Tao. We trained her to do research with us, and then she became empowered, and now she runs the farm. But I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I thought very quickly, I'll just tell you about my home agency, because Dr. Subekti wanted to know a bit more about UNSW science. We have 8 schools. I'm in the top one there, Biological, Earth and Environmental Sciences. And within our schools, we also have centres. So I am in the Centre for Marine Science and Innovation, and I'm also in the Centre for Ecosystem Science. So I'm involved in 2. Most people are involved in at least one centre. We turned 75 last year. We're part of what they call the Group of 8 universities. So we have about 39 universities in Australia. The Group of 8 are the research intensive ones. So we're considered to be research intensive. We're in the top 20 for the QS rankings. We also have the highest medical grant capture, which is we do a lot of cancer research and other medical research on campus. And we're number 1 in Australia for startups and spin-out companies, and also number 1 for employability. But more recently, we've been investing in what we call Progress for All, a strategy where we are trying to make our research far-reaching. So it just doesn't benefit only industry, but benefits everyone. So we want to make sure that everyone is a beneficiary of the research that we do. So we have various activities under our strategy to try and promote that and facilitate it. Where do my teams work? Well, in India, we worked on fish disease and environmental assessment and capacity building. No longer working there, but we used to work there. Indonesia, shrimp and lobster farming, farm restoration. Philippines, carrying capacity of lakes. Vietnam, I'll talk about that today, rice shrimp. Papua New Guinea, tilapia farming, freshwater fish farming. And Timor-Leste and Fiji, we're developing projects at the moment. So if you look at that picture, the gentleman on you can't tell he's a botak like me. He's got a hat on. That's Bayu Priamboda. He's my ex-student, and he's Mr. Lobster. So he does a lot of work on lobsters. And down the bottom is my ex-student Ruby and one of my team members, and that's Mrs. Tao that was on the front cover. So they're all standing in the bottom there on the rice shrimp farming system, which looks like this. So I'll stand up because the pointer's not very good. So in the shrimp farming system, this middle section is where they grow the rice. And then in the canal around here, they grow the shrimp and the crabs. But they alternate. So during the wet season, they do not stock tiger prawn because it's too fresh. Well, it's meant to be too fresh. They do the rice. And then in the dry season, when it's too salty and not enough water, they stop the rice and they focus on the tiger shrimp. And also now kepiting, crab as well. And we were asked to do research, and I say we, it was University of New South Wales, Griffith University, Charles Sturt University, they were the Australian ones, and then in Vietnam, Can Tho University, Kulong Rice Research Institute, and the Research Institute for Aquaculture. So it was a very diverse collaboration with 3 Australian agencies, 3 Vietnamese agencies, and many farmers. We were initially asked to test the farming system to show that it is something that the farmers should adopt. But when we started to do the field work, we realised, so we didn't design the system, it was designed by someone else. When we went to test it, we realised from talking to the farmers that they were not producing very well. They were having problems with the rice and problems with the shrimp. So we had to find out what was the problem, what was causing the mortality of shrimp and very poor rice production. The rice was not growing well, it was not producing enough rice seed, very bad condition. So the system is what we call an extensive system, because for the shrimp, they don't put any shrimp feed. They rely entirely on the natural food in the canal. So we needed to learn what is their natural food. So we did some research on what they are eating. The farmers used to fertilise the rice. So they're paying money for fertiliser for rice, but not money for food for the shrimp. But the shrimp are not growing very well. And in fact, in many cases, the crop was so low, there was no profit, sometimes complete crash. Farmers have now begun, to also farm Vaname, because Vaname is more resilient and can handle poor conditions a lot better. But they're not meant to actually grow it because the government controls in Vietnam what you can grow, when you can grow. But because they were struggling with tiger shrimp, which are more sensitive to environmental change, they were just letting them do it, even though it was not technically legal. But that might change soon. So in the wet season, they're growing rice, but we also encourage them to grow freshwater shrimp as an extra commodity. The problem in the wet season is because of climate change and because of climate variability and because of damming of freshwater upstream, now during the wet season, the soil in the rice field, which should be low salinity, is now high salinity, and it's killing the rice. So technically the wet season is when the rice grows, but now it's too salty because dry weather, not enough rain, not enough fresh water, because of all the dams they're building and other people using fresh water upstream. So that was the challenge for us. We could not really promote a system that had all these problems. So that's the same location. This is the rice crop with seed. So here is where you have crab and shrimp and your rice. But the water quality here we found was very high in nitrogen. And we also found that there was so much nitrogen in the system, the farmers did not need to fertilise. Putting fertiliser on the soil was pointless. The other problem we know, besides salinity, is high water temperature. When you have high salinity, the temperature of water can go up. It holds the heat more. So that's another stress factor for the shrimp. We also found, and you cannot see, but if you go up close, this is tanah sulfat masam. It's acid sulfate soil. So there is acidity, which also affects the shrimp and can also affect what's happening with the rice. So these are the main crops: the mud crab, Penaeus monodon, or tiger shrimp, and that one is the giant freshwater prawn, which is enak, very delicious. When we first suggested they cultivate the prawn, they said no, because there's no market chain. But then more restaurants started asking, and so they started growing them, and now they're making reasonably good money. It's Mrs. Tao. So just on Mrs. Tao, when we were working with the farms, we needed people to help us with the data collection because we could not be there every day. And very often it's women who stay on the farm because the husband will maybe drive an ojek or, you know, have some other job. So we worked with the women and we trained the women how to farm. And Mrs. Tao was one of them. And she enjoyed farming so much. She learnt how to determine the price. And then she discovered that the wholesaler would not tell the truth about the cost and give them low money. So she said no. She got the women in the community and she said, do not give them, don't sell your shrimp low price. This is the price. So they were able to increase their income because everyone said, no, we're not going to sell you the shrimp until you give us the correct market price. She helped us collect data and she created a women's group and she inspired many other women to get involved in shrimp farming. And the men were happy because they were able to go and do a second job because they used to traditionally run. We also learnt that the women are better at managing money. And I learned this in Papua New Guinea as well. In Papua New Guinea, I asked the women, why are the women better with the money? All the women in the room are laughing. And they said, because we have to look after the children and we want the children to have the best opportunity. So because of that motherly connection with their children, they want to make sure they don't waste money. So in Papua New Guinea, sometimes the men will go and drink the money, you know, or gamble the money. So the women try to manage the money, to protect the money. So it turned out involving women had a good outcome for the community. And there was increased income from secondary jobs. Here they're harvesting the freshwater prawn, the prawn that 5 years before they said, no, we're not going to do it. Now it is a big commodity for them. There's a mix of prawn, shrimp and freshwater prawns and also the tiger prawns. So sometimes there is an overlap because the dry season now is longer. What used to be the traditional wet season is shorter. So sometimes they're still growing tiger shrimp when just as the wet season commences, they have a longer season. But the water is so salty very, very salty and very hot. Panas, it's very, very hot. It stresses the shrimp. So the issue is that the farming system wasn't working the way it should because of the continuation of salty conditions in the wet season. And as I mentioned before, a lot of it has to do with climate variability, possibly climate change, and we think it will get worse. And the canal networks, not enough fresh water coming down the system. So this was the big issue that we decided we had to look at, but we had to understand what was going on. If you go to this publication, Lee et al., this is our graphical abstract. So in the dry season, saline water, and they stock tiger shrimp. But by the time we get to the dry-wet transition, the temperature is very, very high, and we begin to see a deterioration also in dissolved oxygen. So this dissolved oxygen, it means it's suboptimal. It's suboptimal in summer. It's still suboptimal here. Sometimes only 2 or 3 milligrams per litre, sometimes even less. That is stressful. So the shrimp are stressed by hot water, stressed by low dissolved oxygen, and stressed by hypersalinity. So from our research, our field research, we discovered, we had students working on this as well. A lot of the Griffith University staff did a lot of work in the field, assisting with this and training the local staff to collect the data. But what we generally found was that the shrimp were not eating either because they are stressed. When you feel sick, you don't want to eat. And the other factor was sometimes not enough natural food. So they were eating the natural food. That's what they depend on. There's no supplementary feed. Because of the change in conditions, the hot water, the high salinity, it was killing the natural food. So the shrimp were stunting, not growing. By the time the wet season came, we started to see improvements in oxygen, but we still had suboptimal conditions occurring, in this case for the rice. The rice is not growing well. So this is another paper. We used what we call the Bayesian belief network. So Stuart Costa, one of the team members, worked with the Vietnamese and the farmers and trained them. And we ran workshops to find out, when did they have a good crop? When did they have a bad crop? When did they have a in the middle crop? Because their knowledge was useful knowledge, and we created a Bayesian belief network, a model that could tell us if we increase the salinity, it would predict what would happen to the rice or happen to the shrimp. So this model, we call it an expert-based model. Our experts were actually the farmers, but we did a scientific one and we did a farmer one, and then we combined the two models. So that paper is available, obviously. This is the one from before. So we looked at the associations between the water quality and the natural food, and the poor water quality is the biggest factor. It is stressing the shrimp, killing the natural food, and affecting the rice. So the dilemma that we face, the big challenges are, most of the farmers are very poor. They cannot afford money. They don't have money to fix some of the problems. So that's a real challenge. How do you help farmers who don't have money and they have nowhere else to go? That's their land. That's all they've got. So that's a challenge. Soil salinity and high water temperatures is a challenge. Well, with the soil salinity, we did experiments in the field. They were run by Charles Sturt University staff and Can Tho University in Vietnam, where they looked at different techniques to wash the soil, but you need a source of fresh water, so not all farms can do it. wash the soil before rice planting to remove as much salt as possible. So we had different field trials that they used. The other problem is that the factors that influence farming and cause the negative impacts are outside the control of the farmers. The farmers cannot release water from a dam for their benefit. They cannot control the weather. So because of these lack of control, what could they do? There was nothing except maybe lime on the soil for acid. That's expensive. Not enough fresh water. How do you dilute the salt in the wet season? You know, the really big challenge for them. And being poor makes it harder. There was a lack of, when we started working, there was a lack of data or inconsistent data for us to be able to show associations. That's why we did the Bayesian Belief Network workshops, to learn from the farmers. And as I mentioned, there are multiple factors. Shrimp disease was a problem at the time. The high salinity, the high temperature, the acid coming from the Tanah sulfat masam. All of these are a big challenge. In some locations, worse than others. In some locations, there's nothing we can do to help them. It is so bad. There's nothing. The government would have to reconsider moving the farmers to another location or compensating them in some way. So this is our research team with people from Australian universities. There's two of my students. We also had field staff helping us. The young man over there is now Dr. Din. He was my student and Michelle Burford's student. Michelle did a lot of training. We realised that the laboratory capacity was low and a lot of the procedures were not producing accurate data, so we had to do a lot of training in the laboratories to improve the quality of the data. Otherwise, our research would not have been very well supported. We also did capacity building in Australia. So, well, there's Dean. This is when he found out his PhD was approved. So he's a very happy man. This is ANSTO, where I'm a research fellow as well. And this is an ion beam analyzer. And this is Lynn, one of our team members who came to Australia to learn about the technology. So we bring people to Australia under the project, and I take my students to Vietnam under the project to learn, like internships. And we found that very effective. So these are some of our trials. We trialled about 25 strains of rice, 25 varieties of rice, looking for the ones that were salt tolerant. We did find some that are salt tolerant, but the quality of the rice is not as good. So the farmers don't know what to do. Do I grow low quality rice and it survives and don't get very good money? Or do I take a risk and farm the good quality rice, but maybe everything will die because it will not rain? Well, the rain comes too late. So that's a difficult one for the farmers. But we did select a few strains to give them an option. We also, because we improved the salinity, reduced it with the washing, they were getting success, and we're able to reuse the waste from the shrimp farming as fertiliser, putting it onto the rice field. And the farmers don't have to buy fertiliser anymore, especially after we found the nitrogen in the water was very high anyway. But now it's cheaper for them to grow rice. So here you can see we've got some sections where we did different soil treatments to reduce salinity. And it was designed to be a study that could be quantitatively rigorous. So we're able to improve rice farming component, but the challenge is still the shrimp. It is really difficult. That is our biggest challenge. So that's from Din. He looked at nutrient cycling. Where are the nutrients coming from? Where are they going? A lot of nutrients come from the canal. because there are other agricultural activities. Again, the farmers cannot control the amount of nutrients that come in. They can't control what other land use is doing. So they are at the mercy of what is happening in the catchment. Very, very difficult for them. And Din, our student, also looked at the oxygen demand in different ponds. And a lot of it had to do with the sediments drawing oxygen out. And think of all the nutrients going into the system, plus there would be bacterial blooms when conditions caused the natural food to die, and that would consume oxygen. And hot saline water is not very good at holding oxygen as well. So there's all these different factors. So for us, working with farmers, that's one of my students, working with farmers and collecting data regularly has been really important for us to understand what is happening in the system and learning from the farmers and what they will accept, what kind of technology. So when we developed the strategies to improve the salinity of the soil, we had to see whether they thought it was practical, whether they're willing to do it. And what I've learned in all my experiences everywhere, farmers are reluctant to adopt technology because they're scared that if they try something new, it will be worse. But because we involved them in our research, they could see the positive, they could see the benefit. So that meant that they could then disseminate. People could trust them and say, well, it worked on my farm, it should work on your farm. So we encourage that knowledge exchange. We're trying to better understand how they exchange knowledge. So I've had a student, she did her honours project there. She's coming back to do a PhD. We're going to look at how does knowledge get shared? Who are the right people to train? To what extent is training women better than training men? And so on and so on. So community engagement is really important for us. These people here are a lot of the farmers that work with us. These are some of the staff. I have a student in Vietnam, Bai. There he is there as well, and there. And Mrs. Tao, some of my students, extension officer. These are the farmers. So we work a lot with the farmers. We spend a lot of time with them. We've built trust relationship with them. They know that we're not going to make them do something that's harmful to their crop. We learn from them, they learn from us. We've become very close. It's almost like family. Same in Indonesia. I have so many ex-students, they're like family, you build, and farmers. You build relationships. Sometimes people say, don't have personal relationships when you're being professional. But sometimes you need to have a connection with the farmer. They need to believe in you, that you are not there just because you want to publish a paper. You're there to do something to help them. Number one rule, never make a promise. Never, never, never say, I promise you, if you let me do research, I will fix your problem. Because research doesn't always get a solution, and then you will cause big disappointment. So where are we going next? Well, at the moment, my student Bai, I'll be seeing him next month in Vietnam, he's looking at possibly using pre and probiotics to help improve the gut microbiome in the shrimp. We've been testing the white-leg shrimp, Pinus vanameae, because if we can show that it is a better alternative to tiger shrimp, the government may approve to use vanameae. We're looking at ways of improving oxygenation, but it has to be practical. So paddle wheels is a way of doing it, but it needs electricity. And if the farmer's crop is small, they cannot afford the electricity for the paddle wheel. We did try diffusers, pipes that diffuse oxygen through the canal, but the farmers kept tripping over the pipes, accidentally cutting the pipes. It didn't work out. But we're looking at getting help from engineers to sort that. We're also looking at predictive modelling. What's going to happen as sea level rises? Is it better for farmers just to stop and the government to buy their land and move them somewhere else and compensate them? Or is there another different type of crop? So one of my colleagues from Charles Sturt University, he's running a program that is looking at those alternatives. So we'll link with him. So really looking at what are the livelihood options. So I don't know if you went to the conference this morning, we talked a lot about social science. Having social scientists involved, local ones, is really important because they can evaluate with the farmers what are acceptable livelihood options. How do we make farmers more resilient? How do we help farmers plan a transition away from rice shrimp? Maybe they should transition to shrimp monoculture, but will rising sea level make that impossible for them? So it's very complicated. The future is not looking good for rice shrimp farming in the Mekong because of the salinity issues and potentially the rising sea levels. So that's it from me. I'm happy to. I gave intentionally a non-technical talk because I think Dickie said there'll be people from different backgrounds. So I gave you the non-technical version and I didn't show data for that reason because then you have to explain the data and then the data will be very technical. So do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Okay, thank you so much, Professor, for very amazing presentation. We found that really interest in the way you are connect with the farmers and also try to find a solution not only for the paper, of course, but also for the farming system, especially rice shrimp. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, right now we are open for the discussion. So before I give time for the online. So I would like to ask you in here who would like to ask a question for Professor. Okay, thank you. So, okay, Bu Endang, please. Okay. Yeah. Bu Endang is from Agribusiness Department.
Oh, sorry. Nggak bisa deh. I'm sorry. I'm very curious about what is your finding in Indonesia. You talk about Vietnam, whether it's very similar Indonesia and Vietnam, but I'm very curious whether this is very your research is not very promising. I catch it's not very promising. Whether this is available in Indonesia and can you give us the examples where is this is available? And I'm very curious whether why you not fit something to the shrimp because shrimp is everything. When in Indonesia in tambak-tambak they are very they are very especially for farmers in fish farmers they are spend more money for feeding. So this is why you doesn't give the same everything. So they are stunting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I've worked on extensive farms in Indonesia, but not rice shrimp farms. And the big challenge in Indonesia is poor site selection. A lot of tambaks were constructed in tanah sulfat masam. So there's a lot of acidity. If you have good tidal flow, tidal water mixing, it can reduce the impacts of the tanah sulfat masam. In Vietnam, we talked about introducing supplementary feed. And we have not excluded that possibility, but the government wanted us to first see whether we could maintain it as purely extensive by managing the water quality. So that may be down the track, we will do it. the farmers said they didn't want to spend money on feed because if you do supplementary feeding, it can take about 60% of your profits away because of the cost. So they do feed in the semi-intensive and intensive. But that could be one of the options, that we move them to a semi-intensive system. What the government would need to do is have an intervention package, startup package, to help them transition, because to go to semi-intensive, they need to spend more money on electricity, money on paddle wheels, money on feed. And at the moment, and this is why we have social scientists involved, the farmers are too scared to adopt semi-intensive practices. But there will come a time, we know from the predictive modelling so far, that they will have to do something different. And unfortunately, same in Australia, many farmers do not want to change. You know, my father did it like this and his father did it like this. So it is a really big challenge. And eventually, we'd like to see demonstration farms established using the alternative practices. This happened in Indonesia too. When we used to interview the farmers and we would say, how much did you spend on the post-larvae? Oh, I don't remember. Oh, you didn't write it down? No. What was your last harvest? Oh, I don't know. Maybe 400 kilos, maybe. Bad crop is, or how good a good crop is. So it's in Indonesia. I've worked in different places. Aceh was the most interesting. In Aceh, the NGOs came and they were offering to build tambak, and people that were not farmers said, "Oh yeah, build tambak." I used to be a farmer. Tsunami destroyed it, even though there's no evidence of destruction. So they built. In Aceh, not one successful crop. It's because the NGOs did not have the expertise. If their goal is to build 20 hectares of ponds, it doesn't matter if the ponds. So the mentality of the NGOs, and there was so much wastage. In South Sulawesi, and they'd give up farming. You're welcome.
Thank you for the question, for the answer, and thank you, Bu Endang, for the question. Is there any more question from the luring participant? Okay. Yeah, Bu Nurul. She is also from agribusiness department. So okay.
Thank you for the opportunity, Ms. Hikmah. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with us, Professor Jasmine. I'm really interested to your study about the rice string system in Vietnam. Is that system suitable to implementation in Indonesia? Because ecologically, Indonesia and Vietnam is not much different. And the second question is, you thought that the rice stream system facing so many challenges, and I think the biggest challenges is climate changes, because it really threatens our agriculture as a whole. So my question is, what is the best strategy to coping that challenge, so that system can sustain in the next few years? Thank you.
Sure, very good question. You know what I've noticed today? The men are too shy to ask questions. The women are ruling. But continue. You can keep asking questions. Yeah, that's a really good question. So if we look at the Mekong, what is difficult about the Mekong? It is highly regulated. Manipulation of water downstream. Or in Indonesia, you will not have the same before it reaches Vietnam, and they have no control. So I think that's an advantage for Indonesia, but for any form of agriculture or aquaculture, site selection is really important, and also carrying capacity, determining how much can that environment have in terms of ponds and how many, because there's the issue of all the feces from the shrimp. What do you do with that feces? We found you can recycle on site or fertilizer for the rice, but you need to educate people to do that. We need to educate people on site selection. Otherwise, they may construct in tanah sulfat masam or in sandy soil, and then they will have the problems that I mentioned in Aceh. In I've seen tens of thousands of ponds abandoned because they were constructed in the wrong place. So we had a project, spatial planning, where we developed maps was getting Dinas agencies to adopt the maps. And Dinas Perikanan had a resource problem. They used to say, we don't have any money, we can't do anything. We just come to the office, read the newspaper, cook some food together, but we don't have money, so we can't go in the field, we can't teach. So that's a problem. And you've got many people now, like I mentioned, the urban drift, young people leaving and don't want to farm. I think there will come a time where Indonesia may have to import rice because your demand for rice is not going down, it's going up. But farmer numbers may go down. So in terms of rice shrimp farming, it would be for the poorest people. They're the people that would benefit. But if you're middle income and you want to invest, you're better off with semi-intensive because you can control more of the factors that are a problem. But any kind of farming is risky. With all the knowledge I have from aquaculture, I would never invest in aquaculture. It's too risky. Very, very risky. My career is based on trying to help farmers who took a risk and it went bad for them. So I would be too scared to invest because I know there are so many factors you cannot control. The weather, and it's changing. Yeah, people in Papua New Guinea, our biggest problem is stealing. People steal, and we lose fish all the time. I have a project. We work in the prison. Right? We teach the prisoners how to farm fish so they can eat fish, and when they get out of prison, they can grow fish and have a job. And it was very successful. The fish one day disappeared. And I said, what happened? Who stole the fish? Which of the prisoners, what did they do? They go, oh no, it wasn't the prisoners. People broke into the jail, cut the fence in the jail, went in the jail at night, stole all the fish. So how many prisons have people break into them? Usually they break out. So yeah. So there's a lot of in Papua New Guinea we have to do with tribal war. The tribes. We actually stopped tribal fighting by getting the tribal warriors to farm fish together, and we worked with gangsters. We taught them how to farm fish and stop being gangsters. We do a lot of things like that. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor, and thank you, Ms. Nora, for the question. Professor, if it's okay for you, the mic should be closer to your mouth because the online participation cannot hear.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. It's okay. Okay, I think one more question from offline. Okay, is it okay? Okay. There is a question. She is a student from biology department. So okay.
My name is Tiara. As a student who is interested in sustainability, so if I would like to conduct research on the rice shrimp farming system, which aspect do you think would be the most interesting to explore further? Prof. Sorry, my voice.
Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Can you hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, what would be the most interesting to do? I think looking at the relationship between water quality and the natural food production. So we did that in Vietnam, but in different countries, you may have different microorganisms in the system. You know, there might be different food sources in the system. So I mentioned I am a research fellow with ANSTO, the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation. One of the things that we do is we use stable isotopes to look at what contributes to the growth of farmed organisms. And although we use stable isotopes on the last project, we didn't use the approach that we do in our fish nutrition. The approach would help us to understand what is contributing to the growth of the shrimp, how does it vary seasonally, and what water quality variables influence the changes in the natural food. And at what is the trigger for a crash? You know, there might be lots of macroalgae that the prawns like to eat, and then 2 days later, all dead. What was the trigger? Was it high temperature? Was it salinity? Was it both? So those associations between water quality, natural food production, and the growth performance of the shrimp would be an interesting topic. We did a little bit, but not enough of it, and not in Indonesia. So you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Professor, and thank you for the question. And then I would like maybe the Dean of FSTUT, Dr. Nurma, do you have any question? Okay, the audience. Okay, what about the offline? If there is no question, I think I will pass to the online because I already have 2 questions in here. The first one, I think, wait a minute. Yeah, I think it's from Rizky Widiani Tias from Malang, one of the students from UT Malang, I guess. So he has questions about this one. Let me read it. So from your research in Vietnam, what could be a seemingly unimportant or trivial matter that might be overlooked by local researcher or government that could improve the condition of rice worm farming, and how should they maintain the aspect? And then also about the comparing to other nations that have already been observed. What are the unique character problems in Indonesia fishery and also rice farming that can be improved, Prof? And the last one, what the area of the field do Indonesian fishery or agricultural researchers need to move forward to in order to reach or support the sustainability? Okay, so there's a question from him.
Sure. The number one priority, I think, not just Indonesia or Vietnam, any country that is involved in aquaculture, the number one priority is to not keep making the same mistakes. So there's an expression in English, when you are in a hole, stop digging, because you just make the hole bigger and you never get out. So we know there are problems, and we understand that most of those problems have to do with poor water quality. And we know that most of the poor water quality problems are associated with a lack of natural movement of water and natural supply of fresh water. The difficulty is that we cannot stop building dams or turn dams off or open the valve to let the water go down, because countries depend now on the dams for energy and for drinking water. And so I think politically it would never happen. We can't immediately control climate change. What I would be doing if I was a leader in a country that had the problems that I'm talking about, I would probably think about, well, how can I control the existing land uses to minimise pressure on aquaculture? But then there would be the politics. The upstream farmers who depend on fresh water may be politically more vocal and stronger than the really poor shrimp farmers who don't have a voice. And they're not likely to be considered as profitable as the upstream. So there's a lot of politics involved and so potentially social conflict. So as a researcher, in another country, I have to stay out of it. You know, I cannot make recommendations on politics or whatever. It really isn't appropriate. But I think the water quality issue is important. Is it the case that we have to, in the future, definitely we need to zone land so we don't exceed the carrying capacity of the system. But going backwards is difficult. When you look at the Mekong, all the canals, you know, they're already heavily engineered. There are floodgates everywhere. Maybe the governments would need to consider compensating people and returning some of that land to wetland. So in Australia, where we had problems with Tanah Sultan and the farmland, very poor quality, it's not producing a lot of beef. The government provided an incentive scheme for people to sell their land to the government, and then the government would buy it and then remove the floodgates and let the natural flow of water back into the farmland. And it began to grow mangroves again, and, you know, wetlands developed. I think that is being considered in Vietnam for some of the areas affected by salinity. But we should learn from our mistakes. So there are not just salinity issues. Also have problems with peat soil. Peat soil is problematic for aquaculture. So that needs to be looked at. Site selection would be my other recommendation, but also carrying capacity modelling. There's a lot of environmental data. Indonesia is rich with environmental data, and doing modelling work to predict what sea level rise will do, where will it go, what is the expected water temperature and salinity as a result, and where. And then to start thinking, do we allow agriculture in that area? Maybe that area is better left as natural environment. Maybe it's better for industry. Maybe it's better for some other land use. But the problem with site selection is that developers do not want to be told where they should and shouldn't develop. So again, in every country, there's going to be politics around land use that you have to navigate through. I'm not sure if I got all the questions there. in terms of sustainability, the big issue for aquaculture in general is the feed. So rice shrimp farming systems are not heavily dependent, if any dependency on feed, but aquaculture in general depends on feed. And so in Lombok, I'm doing work with a student and local industry to look at removing fish from the diet of lobster and using alternative sources of feed, because we want to see children eating the fish, not lobsters. So every type of aquaculture has got a different sustainability issue, but then there are some common ones. Fish meal, used widely in fish feeds, comes from wild fish that are better for humans to consume. So there's a lot of work now looking at soybean, vegetable protein, using inoculating the gut microbiome so that they can digest soybean. I think there's progress in that area, but aquaculture, as lucrative as it can also be destructive if it's not done properly and if it's not done in the right location. So I'm mindful of the time, so I won't.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor. I think one more question from online. There is question from Nurmala. Ibu Nurmala Pangaribuan. I'm really sorry. Okay. She asked about the freshwater in the wet season for rice right now is around pH of 6 until 7, and the saltwater itself in the dry season for shrimps and crabs are pH 7 to 9. So what measures can be taken in Indonesia?
pH 7 to 9 is alkaline to very alkaline. And the question is, why is it so high? Probably because of the salt water, marine water. I don't think that's a huge problem. And 6 to 7 in the rice, that's not a big problem either. It's when the pH gets too acidic, the aluminium in the soil becomes toxic. And interestingly, there's lots of aluminium at pH 3, and there's a little bit of aluminium at pH 5.5, but the type of chemical species of aluminium at 5.5 is very toxic. And it causes the rice to go yellow, and it stops nutrient uptake. So I think pH above 6 is sort of safe. But you also have to consider that some of the rice varieties have actually evolved in humic acids. So it's the type of acid. Is it pH driven by mineral acidity or is it driven by humic acidity? So in a environment where there are humic acids, the aluminium tends to be detoxified and doesn't cause as much of a problem. So yeah, it's a simple question but a complex answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Okay, I think we have limited time, so one more. Okay, so if okay with one more, there is a question from Firdan Diko Andinoval. I think he is interested in the rice shrimp farming, so he asked about the best system from rice shrimp farming in East Java.
I don't.
Been there, Prof?
I probably have. I've been everywhere, but I don't remember all the landscapes. I can't give you a confident answer because my work on rice shrimp farming has been entirely in Vietnam, in a very flat landscape. The only suggestion I would make is make sure you have good site selection and that you do not have acid soil, peaty soil or sandy soil, which I know are the three biggest soil problems in Indonesia. There were hundreds of thousands of abandoned shrimp farms in Indonesia because of poor site selection. And that's rather tragic. And even people still cutting down mangroves. You know, we spoke to one group in where was it? It was in South Sulawesi. And we said to them, don't cut your mangroves, leave your mangroves because they act like a buffer and will protect your ponds from wave action. We went back, second trip, mangroves all gone. And we said, why did you get rid of the mangrove? And they said, oh, I won't mention who, Dinas, blah, blah, blah. Said, oh, you should cut the mangrove down, make money, make charcoal. Oh. So, yeah, it's difficult.
It's the biggest challenge we have to inherit from.
Yeah.
Okay. So, is there any more questions from the online participants? Okay. I think it's not. So, Professor, thank you so much. Okay. So, everyone, can you please give applause for Professor as our appreciation?
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. So I think let me make a summary. So correct me if I am wrong. Okay. So rice stream farming systems, especially in your case study in Vietnam's Mekong's Delta, sustain local livelihood, yet face sustainability challenges from environmental, technical, and also climate pressure. So collaborative research across Australia and also Southeast Asia raises awareness and develops innovative, low-cost, community-based solution for improving the water quality, boost productivity, strengthen farmers' resilience to the climate challenge. Am I correct? Yes. Okay, thank you. So I think there is a message also that Professor wants to share to us, that this case study can be open our eyes to the vital role of the coastal communities in shaping sustainability for the future. So okay, I think right now we are end for our sessions. So on the behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to our speaker, Professor Jess Sammut BA, M.Sc, P.hD, for the valuable knowledge and insights shared with us today. I think we can give applause together.
Thank you again.
Okay. So before I return the session to the MC, Prof, I would like to close this session with pantun. Okay. So I know you're not familiar with pantun, so let me give a brief information. So it is going to be in Bahasa. I'm really sorry. So pantun is one of the Indonesian poetic expression. So it's become tradition in Uttar. So consisting 4 lines. Okay, in total, but I will gonna say it in Bahasa. But what I really need help from you is help me say cakep at the end of 1 line. So only say cakep, Professor, okay? Okay, yeah, that's true. Every time I finish with 1 line, just help me with cakep. Okay, langit biru tampak luas. Angin berhembus membawa nafas. Ilmu dibagi menambah rasa puas. Oke, mari kita jaga alam dengan hati yang ikhlas. Okay, thank you so much. I think that's all from me. So I would like to hand it over back to MC to continue. Have a nice day, everyone, and stay healthy. And see you in the next session.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hikmah, for moderating the session. And of course, a big thank you to Professor Jess Sammut for sharing his expertise with us today on the topic exploring sustainability challenges in rice stream farming systems. And what a truly enlightening session! And please give him a round of applause once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of today's lecture, we would like to express our gratitude to our speaker, Professor Jess Sammut, for his time and dedication. And as a token of our appreciation, we will now present certificates to our distinguished speakers. So, I would like to invite Dean of Faculty of Science and Technology, Universitas Terbuka, to present the certificate to our speakers. Jasmine, I would like to invite you to next is a souvenir from us. gentlemen. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of today's event. On behalf of the Committee on the Quality of Science and Technology Universitas Terbuka, we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to the speaker and the participants. Your contribution have made this event success. And a final reminder to all the attendees to fill out the attendance form by clicking the link shared in the group chat. This event has been an enriching experience full of knowledge, insights, and inspiration from Professor Jasmine, and we look forward to seeing you at future visiting lectures. So thank you once again and have a wonderful day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.